All right, so this deep dive is going to take us into some film critique stuff online.
Okay.
Specifically, all the stuff about this YouTuber critical drinker.
Yeah.
You know, you guys sent in like a ton of sources and stuff for this.
Right.
Forum posts and video essays and even like dictionary definitions.
Uh-huh.
All trying to figure out this question. Is this guy, critical drinker, is he like a legitimate critic or a total grifter?
Interesting.
So let's see if we can like untangle this whole thing.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
What do you think?
Well, I think the first thing that jumps out is that the word grifter gets thrown around a lot, especially online.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's important to like understand what it actually means.
So like, are we talking about like a full-on con artist, you know, like snake oil salesman type stuff?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
The main idea is that a grifter makes money, but they're dishonest about it. They build up trust, and then they exploit it.
Okay, so the accusation is that Critical Drinker is doing that with his film reviews. How, though? Just by having opinions that people disagree with.
Well, it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
There are these YouTubers, Actual Fandom and TA3 Birdman.
Mm-hmm.
They're like his biggest critics, and they say he basically manipulates information to fit a narrative.
What kind of narrative?
The narrative that like straight white men are like marginalized by the media.
Right, marginalized.
Yeah.
Like they're the victims.
Well, that's the argument.
I'm curious how they support that.
So they point to his editing techniques, and they say he uses out-of-context clips, even misleading visuals, to make films seem worse.
Oh, interesting.
Actual Fandom did a whole video on one of Critical Drinker's videos about how men are being emasculated in movies and TV. He used a clip from The Witcher, where Henry Cavill's character seems weak.
Wait, isn't The Witcher about a guy who hunts monsters?
Exactly, and Actual Fandom shows how he cropped the scene to make Cavill look more helpless than he actually is.
That's pretty sneaky.
If it's true.
Yeah.
And TA3 Birdman goes even further. He claims that Critical Drinker spread this fake quote from Isabella Merced, you know the actress,
Okay.
about the movie Madam Web.
What did he say she said?
He said she blamed the film's bad performance on men who hate movies with strong, independent women.
And did she actually say that?
According to TA3 Birdman, Merced denied ever saying that. And Critical Drinker never corrected it.
Wow. Okay, so if these accusations are actually true, that's definitely questionable.
Right.
But there's got to be another side to this, right?
Sure, yeah.
People who actually like this guy's work.
Totally. Over on NeoGASF, there are tons of people defending him.
Interesting. What are they saying?
They think he's like a voice against what they call the woke agenda in Hollywood.
No. Oh, woke. That word is everywhere.
It is.
But before we get into that, I want to talk about this idea of audience capture. I saw that in a few of the sources we got, and I think it's important.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
So what is audience capture exactly?
So it's this idea that some creators, they tailor their content to a specific audience.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily about what they really believe. It's about getting more views.
So they're playing to the crowd to make money.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And TH3 Birdman and some of the users on NeoGAF, they think Critical Drinker might be doing that.
What makes them think that?
They point to his focus on like mainstream movies and blockbusters.
Okay.
And his lack of interest in smaller or like more diverse films.
So the idea is that he's just giving his audience what they want. That outrage and confirmation of their biases.
That's the idea.
Okay, so we've got accusations of like manipulating information, this idea of audience capture, and then this whole debate about wokeness.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so I think it's time to look at Critical Drinker's actual critiques.
Yeah, good idea.
And see how they all fit into this.
Let's do it.
What are some of the things he calls out as being woke?
One thing he talks about a lot is women in non-traditional roles. He uses the term emasculation to describe how male characters are portrayed in movies like Thor, Ragnarok, and Star Wars, The Last Jedi.
I remember his video on Thor, Ragnarok.
Yeah.
He really didn't like that Thor seemed overshadowed by the women.
Right, especially Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
And he had similar criticisms of Star Wars, The Last Jedi.
Oh, right.
He felt like Luke Skywalker was made weaker on purpose to make ready for the new female lead.
Interesting.
And he even applied the same thinking to The Witcher. Even the new live-action Snow White.
Wait, Snow White?
Yeah.
That's not even out yet, is it?
Nope, not even close.
But it's already causing controversy.
Oh, yeah, the casting and the rumors about the changes they're making have sparked a lot of debate.
Oh, right, because they cast a Latina actress as Snow White.
Right.
And I remember that whole thing about how they might be changing the dwarves.
Yeah, lots of talk about that.
I think I saw a video by that YouTuber Xander Hall where they said that Critical Drinker was like bashing the movie before anyone had even seen it.
Right, he was basically criticizing a movie that doesn't even exist yet.
Like he was just looking for something to be outraged about.
Yeah, and Xander Hall also pointed out that Critical Drinker was making a big deal out of the dwarf situation, which wasn't even confirmed yet.
Like he was stirring the pot.
Yeah, knowing his audience was already primed to hate the movie for similar reasons.
Okay, so it seems like all of these things are connected.
Yeah, definitely.
You've got Critical Drinker's criticisms.
Right.
Some people think they're valid and some people think they're biased.
Exactly.
And then you've got these accusations of manipulation and this idea of audience capture and this huge cultural debate about wokeness.
Yep, it's complicated.
It really is a lot to unpack.
For sure.
I'm curious to see where this goes.
Me too. Yeah, it's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion here.
Totally. And we're not even to the center yet.
Yep.
This Snow White thing really shows how, like, one movie can just set everyone off online.
Right.
It's like a Rorschach test for the internet.
Yeah. Definitely. Critical Drinker sees it as, like, wokeness gone too far.
Yeah.
You know, casting choices he doesn't like, changes to the story.
Right. He says Disney's trying to force 21st century American values onto a classic fairy tale.
Yeah.
But isn't that what all adaptations do?
It's true.
They try to reimagine old stories for new audiences.
Yeah, I think the question is where you draw the line.
Yeah, how much is too much?
Right, and who gets to decide?
And then you have Xander Hall saying that Critical Drinker is missing the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what if casting a Latina actress as Snow White actually inspires a whole new generation of kids?
Right, that's a good point.
You know, kids who finally see themselves represented on screen.
Exactly. And what about people with dwarfism? Who might find the original portrayal offensive?
Yeah.
It's like Critical Drinker is so focused on being anti-woke that he's not even thinking about those perspectives.
I feel like this goes back to audience capture.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like maybe he's not trying to trick people, but he's just so focused on giving his audience what they want that he's lost sight of everything else.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
And it makes you think, like, can anyone making stuff online be objective these days?
That's a tough question.
Especially when you need views and engagement to make money.
It's almost like you're encouraged to be extreme.
Yeah.
You know, to be more provocative, just to stand out.
And that can lead to this whole feedback loop. So where content keeps getting more divisive and audiences just get more dug into their own beliefs.
And that can have some real consequences in the real world.
Yeah, especially when it starts to affect politics and social issues.
Absolutely. It's a bit scary when you think about it.
It is. It's like we're all in our own little bubbles online.
Yeah.
Just consuming stuff that confirms what we already think.
Echo chambers.
Yeah, so how do we break out of that?
Well, we all have biases.
Right.
But we have to be aware of them. And then we need to challenge those biases by looking for different viewpoints.
So, like, actually watching those smaller, more diverse films that Critical Drinker doesn't talk about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or reading criticism from writers who have different backgrounds and perspectives.
So it's about being open to having our minds changed?
Yeah, and being open to being wrong sometimes.
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's important for growth.
So, okay, we need to be more critical about what we watch and read online.
Yeah.
But how does that apply to film criticism specifically?
That's a good question.
How can we tell if a reviewer is giving us a real analysis versus just telling us what we want to hear?
Well, one sign is a lack of nuance.
Okay.
If they're always simplifying things into black and white terms, it might mean they're more interested in getting a reaction than actually talking about the movie.
So, like, if everything is either woke or anti-woke with nothing in between.
Exactly, and that's one of the big criticisms of Critical Drinker.
Yeah.
People say he's so focused on this idea of a woke agenda that he can't see movies objectively anymore.
So it's like he's just looking for things that fit what he already believes.
Yeah, instead of approaching each film with an open mind.
And that's a problem because it stops us from having real conversations about all these complicated issues that these films are trying to talk about.
Instead, it just becomes another online fight.
Right.
Where the goal is to win, not to understand.
And in that kind of environment, nobody wins.
Exactly.
So if we're trying not to fall into that trap, what should we look for in a good film critic?
Well, I think honesty is really important.
Okay.
A good critic can admit when they're wrong.
Right.
They can acknowledge their own biases, and they can actually listen to other people's arguments.
So they're not afraid to say, hey, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Exactly. And they're willing to change their minds if they hear a good argument.
I like that.
and they should be passionate about film.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can tell when a critic really loves movies
You can totally tell.
and they want to share that love with you.
The best ones can make you see a film in a totally new way,
Yeah.
even if you didn't like it at first.
Right. They can make you think, make you feel things, make you want to watch more movies.
And isn't that what it's all about?
It is. It's about expanding our horizons and challenging our own ideas.
And finding joy in watching movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do we know if a critic is actually passionate about film versus just pretending to be to get more followers?
That's a tough one. I'd say watch out for people who are always negative.
Okay.
If they're always complaining, if every movie is terrible or woke or ruined,
Yeah.
it might be a sign that they're just trying to get a rise out of people.
So, like, their whole thing is just being angry at Hollywood.
Yeah, pretty much. And look, I'm not saying there aren't problems in Hollywood,
Right.
but a good critic can talk about those problems and still appreciate the art of filmmaking.
So it's about finding that balance
Exactly. Balance between criticism and appreciation.
and being able to explain that balance in a smart and interesting way. So we've talked about honesty, passion, and finding that balance.
Yeah.
Anything else that's important in a film critic?
I think they need to know a lot about film history and theory.
Okay.
They need to be able to put movies into context.
So it's not enough to just have an opinion.
No, not as
You have to be able to explain why you have that opinion.
Exactly. A good critic can show you how a film fits into the bigger picture of cinema.
And that takes work.
Yeah, I mean, studying film, watching lots of different movies, reading criticism from different times and perspectives.
It's about being a student of film, not just a fan.
That's a good way to put it.
And that's a never-ending process.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn.
And that's what makes film criticism so interesting.
Yeah, it's got conversation that never ends.
With new voices and new ideas all the time.
Exactly.
It sounds like finding a good film critic is like finding a good teacher.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
You want someone who knows their stuff, who loves what they do, and who makes you think differently.
Yeah, a good critic can open your mind to new possibilities,
Totally.
new ways of seeing the world.
And they can help you become a better thinker,
Exactly.
a more informed viewer.
It's about empowering the audience,
Yeah.
not just telling them what to think.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
We talked about the accusations against Critical Drinker,
Right.
this whole idea of audience capture,
Yeah.
and what makes a good film critic.
But there's one more thing I think we need to address.
Okay, what's that?
This whole wokeness debate.
Oh, yeah,
That word gets thrown around so much,
it does.
but it feels like people aren't even talking about the same thing.
Totally, like they're speaking different languages.
Yeah, it's become so loaded, it's almost meaningless now.
So before we wrap up, let's try to define wokeness,
Okay.
at least in the context of this discussion.
Good idea.
How are Critical Drinker and his critics using this word?
I think for Critical Drinker, wokeness is about a change he sees in Hollywood. He feels like studios are more worried about sending a message than telling a good story.
Interesting.
He sees it as politics invading entertainment.
Like it's ruining movies.
Yeah, and he thinks it's pushing audiences away.
So he thinks movies should just be entertainment.
Yeah, and he thinks any attempt to talk about social issues or diversity is a bad thing.
But his critics would say that you can do both, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can have a movie that's entertaining and also makes you think
Totally.
that it can challenge norms and still be a good story.
Right, and they'd probably say that this idea of what Critical Drinker considers traditional filmmaking is just a way of excluding certain voices, voices that have been marginalized.
So for them, wokeness isn't about forcing an agenda.
Right.
It's about telling more stories for more people.
That's a good way to put it. It's about acknowledging that representation is important, that diversity makes stories better,
Yeah.
and that movies can change how we see the world.
And maybe those traditional values that Critical Drinker likes are actually harmful.
That's a big conversation happening right now,
Yeah.
not just in Hollywood, but everywhere.
It's a conversation that's not going away anytime soon.
It's not.
It's complicated. There's no easy answer.
No.
I think that's a good place to stop for now. It feels like we went from like a deep dive to a full-on spelunking expedition.
Yeah.
There's so much to think about
It really is.
with this whole Critical Drinker thing.
Yeah, it kind of shows you a lot of the problems with online stuff.
Yeah.
Like, how do you tell what's real criticism and what's just trying to get you mad?
Right.
And how do we deal with changing values in movies and stuff?
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
And you know, one thing that really stuck with me is that idea of audience capture.
Yeah.
Like, even if we assume that he's got good intentions,
Right.
you gotta wonder how much any YouTuber can resist just giving their audience what they want.
That's hard, right? You
Yeah.
want people to watch your videos, you want to build a community, but if you're just chasing views and likes all the time,
Uh-huh.
you might end up losing yourself.
And it can be like a slippery slope.
Yeah, definitely.
You start by like exaggerating a little bit just to make your point,
Right.
and then suddenly you're trapped in the cycle of outrage.
Yeah, and the audience is part of that, too.
Right.
If they're always wanting more extreme stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it creates this pressure cooker
Yeah.
where you can't even have nuanced conversations anymore.
So it's like a two-way street.
It is.
The creators and the audience both have a responsibility
Definitely.
to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back to Critical Drinker.
Okay.
We've seen all the arguments against him, the idea that he might be doing this audience capture thing,
Right.
that his focus on wokeness is making him biased.
Mm.
But how do we as viewers decide what to think about his work? Can we like separate the bias from the actual analysis?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an easy answer. It really comes down to you.
Yeah.
Each person has to look at the evidence,
Uh-huh.
think about the different arguments,
Yeah.
and decide for themselves if they think Critical Drinker is being honest.
So it's like we've given you all the pieces of the puzzle,
Yeah,
but you got to put it together and see what picture you get.
exactly. But there are a few things to keep in mind.
Okay. What are they?
Well, first, think about your own biases.
Like, what do I already think about Critical Drinker?
Yeah, and about wokeness, about movies in general.
It's easy to just agree with someone because they're saying what you already believe.
It is. So take a step back
Okay.
and ask yourself, am I agreeing with this because it makes sense or just because I like hearing it?
That's good advice for anything, really.
It is.
Not just YouTube videos.
Right.
What else?
Think about if Critical Drinker is consistent.
Okay.
Does he judge all movies by the same standards?
Right.
Or is he easier on movies that agree with his views?
That's interesting.
That's a big sign of bias.
Yeah,
A good critic can be fair to a movie, even if they don't like the message.
that makes sense.
And one more thing.
Okay.
Pay attention to how Critical Drinker responds to people who disagree with him.
Mm-hmm.
Does he actually engage with their arguments?
Yeah,
Or does he just dismiss them as woke?
that would be a bad sign for me.
Yeah, if someone isn't willing to even listen to other viewpoints,
Yeah.
it means they're not really interested in having a conversation.
They just want to preach to their own audience.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah.
Is Critical Drinker a grifter? Is he stuck in this audience capture thing?
It's hard to say.
Is he just a guy with strong opinions?
I don't think there's one right answer.
Yeah.
And that's, okay, this wasn't about deciding if he's good or bad.
Right.
It was about understanding how film criticism works online.
We saw how easy it is for accusations to spread, how YouTube and algorithms and all that can shape what we see, and how viewers can actually change what creators make, and how hard it is to know what's true sometimes.
Yeah, especially online.
So what did we learn?
I think we learned that there are no easy answers.
Right.
It's about asking the right questions,
Yeah.
thinking about different points of view, and making up our own minds.
Because the best way to avoid being manipulated
Yeah,
is to be informed and to think critically.
exact.
So as you keep watching Critical Drinker,
Or any other critic,
yeah,
remember to keep thinking for yourself.
don't just take their word for it.
Question everything.
Look for biases.
And keep digging deeper.
You never know what you might find.
That's the fun part.
Thanks for joining us on this crazy journey through the world of online film criticism.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep. See you next time.